Hey y'all, Coach Eric here, and I'm just here to deliver a friendly reminder that you guys need to stop playing around with your health and fitness. Stop putting it on the back burner. Stop taking it as, something that is a side quest, something that, you can get around to it whenever you have the time, whenever things are better. Trust me, in most people's cases, that is the thing that they need to make better to make life in general better. And so, a couple things to consider because I feel like, people can sit up here all day and say, hey, try to focus more on your health and fitness. But then it's like, okay, well, what do I do? You need to focus on all three phases, all three components of health and fitness, which is your physical fitness to include your diet, your diet and exercise essentially, your mental fitness, and then your spiritual fitness. So you need to be strong in all three pillars ideally, but if you're struggling in one or more of those, try to use the one that you're not struggling in or the two that you're not struggling in to really, lock down your vibe, lock down your aura, and work on that one that might be struggling or those two pillars that might be struggling. And so looking at things again through a fitness lens, through like a physical fitness lens, that's getting different types of movement, getting consistent movement, making sure that you're doing things in such a way that you can sustain it. Don't get off to a sprint of a start with a new routine and then find out a couple weeks or a couple months later that you just can't keep it up and that you're feeling burnt out, because that honestly defeats the purpose, right? It's a learning experience for sure, but it's probably not what you're going for. You're going for something bigger. And so I think that when people are coming up with a plan, whether they have the help of a professional or they do it solo, they freelance it, they freestyle it, whatever the case is, you have to be able to develop the plan, implement the plan, and that's where you're, really perfecting it and honing your craft, and then lock that in. If it's working for you and you're satisfied with the results and you're pretty stoked and about the execution of it, you haven't gotten tired of it yet, lock that in. And then you want to figure out, like, how much energy, how much brain power is this costing me to kind of run this routine, my series of, let's say, apps that you keep open to keep your life running as you'd like. What's the cost of that? And then once you're able to calculate that cost, figure out how to make it cost less. You know what I mean? And all of this ends up contributing to what I would say is a huge reduction in overall stress on the body, stress on the mind, stress on the spirit, which is what I think a lot of us actually need when it's all said and done. I think, not to get too technical on it, but I think far too many people spend way too much time in the fight or flight mode and not enough time where that nervous system is in a lower, more inactive state where you're in that rest and digest, that parasympathetic nervous system. I don't think enough people spend enough time there, and that's why we get a lot of the problems that we get. Stress is a catalyst for adaptation, but at the same time, it is a stressor. You know what I mean? So it's something that our body has to counter. It's something that our body has to battle back from and make right, if you want to put it that way. And so we have to modulate that. We have to monitor it. We have to make sure that it's introduced at the right times and that it's not introduced at the wrong times. And then we have to, practice humility along the way. We got to take the ego out of the discussion. We got to take it out of the process as much as possible. And that's easier said than done in and of itself. But trust me, it is doable. Been there, done that. And it's something that is a prerequisite to lasting change, to true change. You really have to get that ego removed as much as possible from the process. So I think one thing that's not talked about enough, and maybe I'll close with this, is blood flow in general, right? Blood flow needs to be a certain way for every human on the planet, and if we have too much stress, we can compromise that, specifically through what's called vasoconstriction, right? We get too much stress, we get too much narrowing of the blood vessels, the passageways that carry the blood and subsequently the nutrients all over the body, and that causes a whole host of downstream issues, as you can imagine. And so the name of the game is vasodilation. In most people's cases, for most scenarios, we want to stay having good flow channels, for the blood and nutrients. So you want to, in essence, limit things that are vasoconstricting: stress, dehydration, lack of sleep, things of that nature, too much caffeine. And you want to essentially maximize things that are vasodilating: good sleep, good hydration, proper supplementation if you need to, eating good, clean foods whenever possible. If I didn't already say it, controlling your mental rumination, things like that, breath work, getting outside, getting sunlight, all those things are very pro, vasodilating factors. They're going to get those blood vessels wider, and that's essentially what we want. You know what I mean? So that's something to consider. And also too, if you haven't already, or if you just haven't done it in a while and you'd like to get back into it, consider fasting, right? Because obviously I'm not trying to sell you anything, because there's nothing to sell with that, but in reality, a lot of the issues that our body has are much easier taken care of, or much easier remedied, when we don't have to worry about the breakdown of food and the uptake of nutrients going on in the background, or pretty much the foreground essentially. And so that's something to think about. Pretty much anybody except for pregnant women and children can explore fasting in a safe manner, and progress from there. But it's something that I think is worth looking into for most people in most cases, because it really does give your body a chance to clean itself out. I've been doing it now for just about 7 years, consistently, the greater part of the week, each and every week for the last 7 years. And, experimenting with different times and lengths and stuff like that, different fasting patterns. And it's been one of the best, if not the best, decisions I've ever made in my life. I'm going on 39 this year, going to be 40 next year, and I feel and I think look younger than I did 10 years ago in a lot of ways, and I definitely perform a lot better than I did 10 years ago, thinking back to my late 20s when I was already starting to have issues that I now know were associated with what's called metabolic syndrome, which is your metabolism just going in the wrong direction. And I have a bunch of reasons for that I could pinpoint why that was, lifestyle habits at the time that I was, that I had that weren't contributing to good metabolic health. But at the end of the day, I know better now. My clients know better now. And when we know better, we grow better. I say it all the time, So just wanted to make that video, not get too long-winded, but develop a plan, get that plan in place, enjoy that plan, and then, like I said, figure out a way to keep that plan running in the background, essentially on autopilot, that not only shows true mastery of efficiency with which you've selected as your process, but realistically that's going to be the way that we're able to sustain it, and it's not what we can do for a season or for a reason, like I always say, but what we can do for a long time that really makes the difference, day in and day out. So something to consider. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I don't market myself like I used to, or I don't post coaching pitch ads like I used to, or post like I used to, because in all honesty, I got a good client load right now. I'm more than happy with what I got going on, work-wise, purpose-wise, not feeling like I lack in any of those areas. And I'm telling you, it's due to a lot of the stuff that I just talked about in the last 8 minutes, to also include, things like mindfulness and breath work and a lot of self-reflection and stuff like that, things that I teach clients on a daily basis. So tap in. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to comment down below wherever you see this posted. And as always, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. You guys have a great rest of your week. Talk to you later. Coach out.